Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Daniel Pontefract, in the house. Good pal, what a thinker, Dr. Keating. Keith, a short intro of about 11 minutes, and then we'll get into some very specific questions about this, the multiple award-winning book, The Trusted Learning Advisor. So, Dr. Keating, distinguished figure in the field of learning and development, L&D, currently serving as the Chief Learning and Development Officer at BDO Canada, where he aligns the firm's L&D strategy with the needs of its people and clients. Dr. Keating is also the Academic Director for the University of Pennsylvania's Chief Learning Officer Doctoral Program. Smart dude, yes. The award-winning book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, which also provides practical guidance for L&D professionals to evolve from order takers, we're going to get into this, Keith, to strategic business partners. He's a sought-after keynote speaker who advocates for lifelong learning as a pathway to career advancement and emphasizes the importance of human talent as the cornerstone of organizational success. Do you want more? Yes, you do. He's a celebrated advocate for talent development, leveraging his platform to underline the value of human talent as the cornerstone of organizational success. He's a scholar practitioner earning 2 master's degrees and a doctorate in organizational learning from the aforementioned University of Penn. Keith, good to see you. I know you're dialing in from the friendly confines of Mexico. I want to start with a line from the book while you multitask.
Sorry.
You're still here?
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I told you 11 minutes.
I totally tuned out there.
I curated a short version of the 11-minute one.
Yeah,
Okay, in the book,
my mother thanks you for all of that, by the way.
you have this. We have several lines through the.
You'd have to have multiple lines in a book.
235 pages. So this line I love because it's been the bane of my existence now as a recovering Chief Learning and Development Officer. Today, or quote, today, many people in learning and development simply follow orders. Stakeholders tell them the problem, decide on a solution, and then expect L&D teams to carry it out without question. And so this really unpacks, for me, the evolution of the book and the point you're making throughout, which is stop being an order taker and try to become a trusted learning advisor. So let's start there. Order taker in L&D, order takers, quite frankly, in the organization, but in L&D is a problem. So why is it happening? What is the deal with order takers in L&D?
Well, an order taker in L&D is like a pharmacist filling that prescription without even knowing the diagnosis. Stakeholders come to us with this solution already in mind. We need training on X. We need learning on X. And the order taker delivers it without questioning whether or not it's the right approach or that's even the right solution. So here's the issue with that. What if the prescription is wrong? Imagine that doctor prescribing the medication without examining the patients or running the tests. You wouldn't want the same thing in your organizations. And the symptoms, yeah, they could be temporarily addressed there, but what's the root cause of that illness? And sometimes it is illnesses that remain untreated and then potentially worsen over time. So that's what happens when we act like order takers. We're implementing these solutions without diagnosing the actual problem. So why is this an issue beyond everything I just shared? It diminishes our credibility and our value. it keeps this perpetual mindset that talent development, learning and development, whatever you want to call it, our focus on helping people grow and develop is a transactional function, that we're there simply to check these boxes rather than to drive change. And then for the organization, it's a lost opportunity to solve real challenges, to help real people grow and ultimately drive value. And so at the end of the day, long story short, it keeps us from driving value.
So you've got a couple models we're going to get into, the IDAD model, the L&D maturity model. But before that, it dawned on me as well that it's perhaps, Keith, a two-part problem. You have, in essence, maybe an identity crisis with L&D. Aren't they supposed to be order takers? And then the flip side are the order givers. Is there also, ergo, an issue with how the organization, non-L&D, non-HR, non-performance, non-talent, think of what an L&D professional is supposed to be doing inside the organization?
Absolutely. It is a identity crisis, if you will. And if you think back, I don't really blame anybody. If you think back to the manufacturing industrial revolution, when training sort of evolved, a manager would identify there was an issue on the line and
Mhm.
someone needed to be trained to move this widget here. So the manager would say, hey, go train them to move this widget here. That mindset just perpetuated and continued, understandably so, until we became knowledgeable and we started to understand, oh, there's a science to learning,
Mm.
to what we do, to why we do, to how we do it. And then you have a small subset of this industry that understand that. You have a large subset of this industry that does not understand that. And I will raise my hand wholeheartedly and say, for the first 15 years of my career, I had no idea that there were learning sciences. No one ever told me that. There's not, and this is part of the value, I think, of the field is, well, it's a catch 22. There's a very low barrier to entry. You don't have to have a specific degree. You don't have to have a specific credential. Anybody can say, I'm an L&D practitioner, and no one can really hold you accountable to that, which means that we as an industry have to treat this with the utmost respect.
Mm.
And if we don't build our credibility, we don't invest the time and the energy to building up the skill sets that we need to have, then we, again, continue to perpetuate this cycle. So yes, it's both an identity crisis because there's lots of L&D people, I don't even want to call them practitioners, that don't have that fundamental skill set, like myself, who eventually learned it. Then you also do have stakeholders who historically have had negative experiences within L&D. And because they didn't have true trusted learning advisors, their experience was negative. They had these order takers. And so they're behaving, our stakeholders are behaving the way that they've always behaved because there hasn't been anybody to show them a different path forward, that L&D can be a true strategic business partner driving value for the organization.
It's sort of like you have done the legwork, the hard work, the analyses of what effectively has been like the Taylorism of L&D and saying, no, you know what, that's actually part and parcel to the order taker mindset. Like L&D Taylorism is wait for the widget people to tell us what the widget size should be and then go make this widget. And what you're saying in the book and your philosophy overall, and again, I guess, disclaimer, you and I get the chance to work together. So I've seen you in action, is that the trusted learning advisor is ergo the individual who is eradicating the Taylorism thinking, both within the profession or the unit of L&D in an organization like a BDO Canada, but also advocating and inculcating a culture of what a trusted learning advisor is for the business to see that you are sort of that individual with that competence, that intellect, that empathy, that understanding, that trust. So, what is the trusted learning advisor? Tell us there, and then we'll get into the models.
Great question. Trusted learning advisor is this. It is a strategic business partner who is embedded in the business, who knows the business just as good as the stakeholder, if not even better. And
Mm.
that's my personal goal for me and my team. I want to know the business just as good, but better than them. I want to be able to speak their language. I want to know their goals, their visions. I want to know the challenges they've had in the last 3 years. I want to know where the industry is going in the next 3 to 5 years. We need to go beyond this idea of just executing these requests that come to us. It's about being that collaborative partner who works with the stakeholders to uncover the challenges, identify root cause analysis, designing solutions with the ultimate business goal in mind. So, in short, trusted learning advisors don't just deliver training, we deliver value by asking the right questions, by providing insights, and by positioning learning as a key lever and enabler for organizational success.
What I also love, well done you. What I also love though is you don't for a second suggest that the business can't come up with ideas or still can knock on the door of L&D and say, hey, we want this or we have this problem, which I think is where the IDAD model comes in quite usefully before we get to the maturity model. So the IDAD, basically, it stands for intake, discovery, analysis, and decision. So take the listener and the viewer through how what IDAD is, I suppose, and then again in form of its execution, why it's useful for people, quote, in the business.
Yeah, so to the first part of your question, absolutely bring your ideas,
Yeah.
bring your potential problems, but also you're wasting a little bit of brain power when you're thinking that deep. If we're truly behaving like a trusted learning advisor, we're 2 steps ahead of our stakeholders. My goal is my stakeholders should never have to reach out to me. I should have already had those meetings set up. I should
Mm.
already be proactively thinking about the business problems that could exist. I should be embedded, talking with my learners, talking with my stakeholders, being proactive. To me, and again, this is my position. If my stakeholder has to reach out to me, it's a little bit of a failure on my part. It
Mm.
means there wasn't a touch point somewhere. I wasn't proactively having a conversation with them. And I don't mean just having the stakeholder reach out to have a conversation, but if they're saying, hey, there's this problem, there's this need, and I didn't already know about it, then there was a breakdown in the process for me somewhere before. But getting ahead of myself, that's stage 2 of being a trusted learning advisor.
Right,
To your
right.
question, the IDAD process. So intake, discovery, analysis, decision. It helps us uncover deeper challenges to ensure that we're solving the right problem by transforming how we engage in stakeholders. And let me give you a quick caveat. There are how many zillions of processes and methodologies and acronyms out there. So I struggled with this for a really long time on whether I wanted to throw a new one into the mix.
Mm.
For me, it's similar to design thinking. That would be my go-to methodology because design thinking is a problem finding
Yeah.
methodology, then moves into problem solving. So IDAD kind of fits in there. Intake, it focuses on when that request comes in, if we haven't been proactive already, we reframe that request as an opportunity for collaboration instead of just immediately accepting the solution as it's presented. We want to initiate that consultative dialogue. So, again, going back to design thinking, empathy research, understanding, listening, doing your root cause analysis. It's like saying, thank you. I love you brought this problem to me. And that may absolutely be the right problem, but I just want to take a step back and I want to do a little bit of digging to understand what may be surrounding that problem, what the root cause is, who the people are impacted to make sure that we're solving the right problem. Worst case scenario, we validate what the stakeholder brought us. That's the worst case.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, we've uncovered there's a whole host of other issues there that if we had done this one thing, it wouldn't have actually solved it. It would have been a temporary solution for a larger issue. So that's the intake. Next, we've got discovery, and that's where we're working back, we're collaboratively kind of peeling back the layers to uncover what kind of the root cause could be, the challenges, et cetera. Then we've got the analysis phase where we're evaluating the request that they brought us, the order, against the organizational goals with the needs of the learners.
Mm.
So we're taking a step back to bring strategy into the mix, which allows us to craft solutions that align with better priorities, leading us to the final D, which is the decision phase. And this is a shared discussion with the stakeholder to evaluate all of the analysis that we've done to make a decision. Do we want to move forward with this? If we do move forward with this, here's the risks that may be inherent, especially if I believe this is not the right solution. Stakeholders still may want to move forward with it. So that's part of the decision phase. And then, of course, in that, I also call it the CYA phase, where if they want to move forward with something that we've identified as not the right solution, I get them to actually sign off. It's a little bit of a disclaimer to say, hey, I don't know that I agree with this. You want this, these are the risks, and you're accepting the risks.
Where does I mean, one of the contentious potentially, Keith, issues within the L&D space is where budget sits, right? So corporate budget, business unit budget, and so when you have the IDAD playing out, how do we re-educate L&D to potentially be entrepreneurial when it comes to the requirement that obviously that requires investment to get a lot of the things that are either asked for in the I phase or in the decision phase, then are executing ultimately on what it is that we're going to move forward for.
Value is a key component. Understanding again how it aligns with organizational needs versus a potential stakeholder need, which may not be aligned to the actual challenge at hand. What I try to focus on more so is running qualitative research initiatives at least twice a year. So I like to spend time with a subset of the population, 10%, depending on the size of the organization, and proactively gathering that data and analyzing that data and identifying potential business problems that may exist that we may not have any awareness that exists. The voice of the learner is so much more powerful than my own. One of my goals too is to try and keep me out of the conversation. I don't want to say I believe, I feel, I think. I want it to all be data driven. So long story short is proactively bringing in that research beforehand, having an idea of some challenges that exist, analyzing how they connect to the larger goals. And the budget question, that's literally and figuratively the $1 million question. And it ultimately depends on the context of organizations. I think one of the biggest challenges that L&D practitioners face is we're looking for that holy grail. We're looking for that one single solution. And everything that we're talking about here today has to be contextualized to your organization. Just because Keith said and because BDO is doing it doesn't mean that it's a lift and shift that's going to work elsewhere. What worked for me at General Motors didn't work at HSBC. What worked at HSBC isn't working here. So it's just a little bit of a caveat that the budget question is definitely something that has to be explored to understand where does the money ultimately sit, who's going to receive the value, the potential ROI from the project, and figuring out how do you align those to get the money, honey.
Okay. Well, to come off of IDAD and to move into the maturity model, what I like about IDAD is that it is kind of like it's a really intuitive playbook to help the individual in L&D move from reactive to proactive, like going through those 4 phases. And even individually, you can sort of see how you're programming and recommending the L&D professional to be far less reactive and waiting. So it's the kind of the setup, right? It's like, no, we don't want you to be an order taker. We want you to use IDAD in a way that is useful to the stakeholders, kind of like situation. But then when you get into the 5 levels of the L&D maturity model, then I thought, oh my gosh, this is like the yin to the yang. What you've done with the maturity model is say, look, if you're at level 1, you are reactive. And level 1, for folks that haven't yet read the book, is the training administrator. Like that's literally the order taker. Like, feed it to me. My mouth is open. I just, give me the garbage. I'll do it for you, whatever it takes. So take us through the 5 levels and how, if I'm reading correctly, and I think I am, that you're advocating from reactive to proactive with IDAD in relationship to these levels. And as we go from reactive to strategic and ultimately to advisor, I mean, that's just sort of the, as we say, the cat's meow, Keith. Tell us about your 5 level model.
Well, I'm allergic to cats,
F-
so I
Bad
have to come up with a
metaphor.
different,
Yeah.
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 I'll keep it simple in the sense that it's a spectrum, it's a pendulum, and we can move from these reactive order takers over here to the strategic business partners on the proactive range.
Hmm.
For me, the maturity model was really born out of 3 plus 1, so we'll say four, four characteristics. Where am I on this maturity spectrum? Am I that reactive order taker? Am I moving to being a little bit proactive to strategic to an advisor and being honest
Hmm.
and introspective? Level 1. Level 2, where's my team? Because I could think I'm the cat's meow, I'm over here, but if my stakeholders are receiving a different experience depending on who they talk to, then their perception of us is going to be different. So
It's
where am
not
I
it's not
individually?
uniform.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where am I individually? Where is my team, my collective team? Where is my organization? What's the maturity level of my organization to be willing to accept me as a trusted learning advisor? Because I've been in situations where we can do everything right and we have an immature learning culture. We
Hmm.
have an immature organization that isn't ready to accept us as strategic business partners. Those are the three criteria that I use to measure on the maturity level. But then it comes down to the ultimate, I don't know, voice of God, whomever that God is of your choice, which is your stakeholder. Where does your stakeholder see you on this maturity level? And the only way to understand that is to ask them and to understand from their perspective. I liken this to the idea of leader and leadership. You don't get to call yourself a leader. You don't put it on your business card. People use business cards anymore. I'm not going to put it on LinkedIn as my job title. You have manager, you have C-suite, you have all these other things, but you don't have leader.
Hmm.
Whether or not you're a leader is determined by, is anybody willing to follow me? And so other people make that determination. And it's the same with being a trusted learning advisor. I don't get to call myself this. Ultimately, it's up to my stakeholders and whether or not they perceive me as a trusted learning advisor. And so for me, the maturity model is just a quick way for you to identify where you are on this spectrum, which it's not fixed. It does swing back and forth, where your team is, where your organization is, and ultimately where your stakeholder is, because their perception is our reality.
Mm. One of the things that dawned on me through the book as well is you're both literally, directly, and then sometimes subliminally trying to get the L&D professional to understand the real importance of competence and confidence. Because to get to sort of that trusted learning advisor, level 5 strategic thinker, proactive, et cetera, there's a fair amount of both competence and confidence that can happen. Now, for example, if one is full of competence but doesn't have the confidence to sit themselves in the meeting, to push forward, to kind of like insert themselves in a way that is not gross and, I'm going to like be here as some idiot on a wall, but that to be that valiant, useful partner. How do you see, I suppose, like the profession trying to evolve where all of us feel both competent and confident that we can be that trusted learning advisor? What are some of your, I guess, things that useful tips and tricks that we should be thinking about?
Step 1, order the book. Step 2, read
Fair.
the book. There's so much that we could talk. I'm at a loss. I don't even know where to begin. I think it's the curiosity and the willingness to want to be better, to
Yeah.
want to change, to have that growth mindset. It's also about being comfortable enough to fail,
Mm.
because there is going to be failure, and there's an acronym I used in the book FAIL, which stands for first attempt in learning. And I don't think I made that up.
I love
I,
it. I haven't seen it before. That was
I,
great.
I'm afraid to say I taking credit for it. I don't know where I heard it.
Yeah.
Maybe I made it up in a dream. I don't know. I think what somebody said, there's only 7 original stories, and those were all done by Shakespeare. Everything else after that is just regurgitation. So anyway, it's about failure. And Thomas Edison supposedly said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Mhm.
And for me, that ability to embrace this idea of misstepping along the way on that path to discovery and that perspective is what we need to be embracing, all of us, but also those on the journey to being trusted learning advisors.
So that lends itself nicely and dovetails into the idea of culture and that idea of culture of inquiry, meaning when, and I know, well, I have experienced this for certain directly as a recovering chief learning officer, where organizations whom prioritize EBITDA, execution, there's just such a pressure on the quarterlies, et cetera, then, we sometimes potentially lose sight of exploration. We lose sight of that culture of inquiry, lose sight because of the pressures on how we might be curious. So how
Mm-hmm.
does the L&D professional balance the quote needs of the business to execute with what we're trying to inculcate, that culture of inquiry?
Navigating that tension, it's a balancing act. You've
Hmm.
got the business needs, and then you've got the people and their needs, and hopefully those are aligned, and we're sort of somewhere in the middle. I think it starts with sometimes needing to just reframe the conversation. If we take a step back, employee growth and well-being, that's what we focus on. And for me, my mantra is learning changes lives. That's what we do. Now, does it feel like we're doing that all the time, every day? No, not at all. There's a lot of stuff that we have to get through to get to those moments where we do get to create that impact. But ultimately, that's what we do, is we're changing lives. So we have to think about employee growth, well-being, that they're not separate from business success. They're
Yeah.
absolutely foundational to it. And there's so much research that exists that engaged, well-supported employees are more productive, they're innovative, they're committed, and that ultimately drives better organizational outcomes. And so we can use that data, we can use those case studies to demonstrate how investing in employees aligns with business growth. And then I
So
would say, go ahead.
what does the L&D professional, whether they're CLO or otherwise, do they in this kind of understanding of inquiry and or trying to create cultures of inquiry and being curious and helping the quote the business. I hate using that, but the people whom are our stakeholders we're trying to serve. Do we have to develop a stronger sense of empathy? Do we have to get a stronger sense of, well, what's really going on, quote, over there? I know that I'm a I'm a business partner. I know that I'm supposed to be planted inside of that business. I'm supposed to feel and be proactive and I'm strategic. So is empathy the thing that's needed more so? I'm just trying to unpack like some of the traits or attributes or characteristics that you see that we're trying to develop as an L&D professional to help the organization.
Curiosity, critical thinking,
Yeah.
empathy, absolutely vital for trusted learning advisors. I'll share a quick story. In my doctoral research, I was studying chief financial officers of Fortune 500 companies, and I wanted to understand from their perspective whether or not they find value in what we do in organizational learning development. And I remember a quote that one of the CFOs said to me, and it was, I have so many fires at my feet that I'm trying to put out. I can't care about what you care about because I can't see past these fires.
Uh,
Help me see past these fires. Help me see the true stories that exist. Stop sending me Excel spreadsheets with your ROI data, which, by the way you're calculating ROI isn't the way we calculate it. I can't
yeah.
use that data. It's
Right.
meaningless to me. So stop sending it to me. Tell me about the stories. Empathy helps us when we're addressing people who are resistant to change. It allows us to understand their perspectives and their concerns and their fears. And it comes down to that first step of active listening. And that's about building relationships. Well, growing up in this industry, I was told, do not talk to the CFOs, do not talk to finance. If you have cost savings, don't tell them. And if you think you have ROI, don't tell them that either, because then they're going to cut our budget, or they're going to expect us to repeat that every time we run this program. And we know there's so many outside variables that impact our ROI, or level
Yeah.
of success. So when I got time to pick my doctoral topic, I remember thinking about how fearful I've always been of them. And then I thought, well, should I be? Because they should be our stakeholder, but no one's talking to them. So long story short, it's about active listening. It's about building the relationships to understand what their challenges are, understand what their problems are, their fires are, understand why they're resistant to whatever it is that we may be countering when they're giving us these orders. Sometimes your stakeholder is also an order taker. Somebody told somebody told somebody, and now that person is telling us. And then we go back to them and we say, oh, we need a needs analysis, and it's going to take us 3 months, and we need X number of resources, and we need all these things. And they're like, I don't care about any of that. I was
Uh-huh.
told to do this. I need you to get it done. So one of the questions I always encourage my team to figure out is there a fire? Because if your house was on fire, I don't think you would want me to take a step back and say, Dan, let's do a needs analysis. Did you leave the stove on again? We've talked
Yeah.
about this. Did you
Yeah.
leave everything plugged in? Was it arson? Did you leave a candle? No. You want us to go and get the water and get everybody together and put the fire out. Then once things have calmed down, we can take a step back and we can do the analysis. And all of that is really rooted in empathy to understand the stakeholders, the challenges they're facing, but then also the empathy that we need for our learners to understand their situations. Because often L&D is just creating these programs and we're sending out the email to say, hey, go to your LMS and launch this. And no one cares because they've got their own fires that they're dealing with. It's our job to figure out what are all those little fires and how can we help you put them out immediately? And then how can we help you prevent them from happening in the future?
It speaks to a couple of things there, of course, right? So it is the relationship building that's necessary of L&D, the proactiveness that you're alluding to, certainly at the trusted learning advisor level for certain, the strategic sense. But it's also kind of, well, burn the notion of order taker. And when, however, the business or leaders, quote, not in L&D, think of L&D with these kind of preconceived solutions or notions of what L&D is, I think it's really incumbent upon the new L&D professional, the new CLO, the Dr. Keith Keatings of this world, to be that proactive, collaborative mindset individual. So how do we help? How do you help? How do you advise other CLOs when you're working with them as a coach, or UPenn, with all the stuff that you get to do with these folks? What is it that that muscle they need to develop to be collaborative? Is it reaching out just to CFO and just saying, "Hey, no one's probably talking to you"? Is it what, like, to help me understand what we're needing to do a little bit more of, I guess, from a CLO's office perspective?
So I'm going to completely blow your mind with this one.
Uh-oh.
Instead of being order takers, we take the order. I'm not advocating that we don't take the order.
Yeah.
I'm just advocating that we stop being order takers. So,
Yeah.
and life cycle of an order taker is somebody identified the problem, somebody identified the solution, somebody told you what to do, and then you did it.
Right.
We still need to be that collaborative business partner and open the door for that discussion when they are bringing us this order. So that's kind of one caveat. We take the order. It's what we do after we take the order that really drives the value. So to answer your question more specifically, what do we need to do? One, we need to be rooted in science.
Hmm.
Science. We need to have data. We need to have empirical evidence. We have external research firms. You've got World Economic Forum. You've got McKinsey Global Institute. You need to be conducting internal research in your organization. You need to capture the voice of the learner, the voice of your stakeholder. Do that research proactively to identify problems that may exist that you don't even know exist through things like design thinking. When we bring external research and internal research, and we combine it with case studies of what worked previously and what didn't work previously, when we receive those orders or we're having those proactive conversations, when we bring all that together, that is the recipe for success of evolving to being a strategic business partner, a trusted learning advisor. Because in that conversation, nowhere am I saying Keith thinks, Keith feels, Keith believes.
Yeah.
I'm saying, according to the World Economic Forum, these are the 3 top skill gaps in our industry in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, McKinsey also backed that up, and here's a couple of examples of what McKinsey said. So we spent some time with the learners, and we did some qualitative research. We found these 3 business problems are the most prominent ones keeping the business from driving value. We talked to a couple of other service lines, and we found out a couple of them are having some of the similar issues. So you're not alone in this. And by the way, here's a couple of case studies of how this worked at other organizations. This is why we feel this could be a solid approach to moving forward. When you bring all of that in, how can your stakeholder argue with that? Stakeholder can argue with me, Keith, and my voice and my opinion, and they can say things like, well, you don't know my business, which we hear often. It's our job and our responsibility to make sure that they know we know their business, which means we have to know their business, which means we have to do all of these activities, which feels overwhelming, but that's what makes us trusted learning advisors. By not doing these activities, you remain as an order taker.
Okay, a couple more because you've been generous with your time. But there's another tension conflict that I know I felt, and I'm assuming you have as well, and that is the corporate L&D objectives. So things that the CLO or the CEO actually want to execute on across the board. And then you have the tension of what the business unit or each individual unit needs or wants for their own devices, right, for the year. So you have this balancing act of the corporate L&D, we need to go do this for the org. Everyone needs, quote, this. And there could be multiple thises. But then there's the business units needs. And so you have this potential tension, right, which is a lot of learning and development needed. You're telling me to do this, and I want to do this, and whether that's a budget issue, a time issue, a development delivery, Keith, there are these tensions. So how do you, as the CLO for an organization, look at it with the mindfulness needed, right, for all of these different deliverables that could be on the plate?
Just enjoying the sound of the waves crashing. So step 1 is taking a step back to think
I love that.
strategically and reflect. There are always competing priorities in organizations. I would, oh, be careful. People listen to this. For you, not for me. Which, by the way, thank you for inviting me. I feel like, did you have a last minute cancellation or something? I know your prior guest list. I'm like, is he out of people?
Yeah.
It's the relationship with the stakeholder. So I'm thinking of a Venn diagram. It's
Yeah.
your stakeholder, it's your overall organization objectives, and then it's the learners. We are sometimes caught in the middle of this, and it's our job to figure out how to work through that. And it can be as simple or as complicated as sitting down with your stakeholders and asking them. And I will do this. I'll collect all of these inputs. And by the time I'm finished, I'll have often about 42 priorities.
Yeah.
Well, when we have 42 priorities, how many priorities do we actually have?
None.
0. Yes, gold star for you. And so I will give it back to them and say, great, we cannot do all 42 of these. Pick 3. What are the top 3 areas that we can focus on? Now, you can't necessarily do that collectively, but I'll do that individually. Then I'll be able to narrow down that 42, and then maybe now I'm down at 12. And I'll repeat the cycle again. Then, if needed, go up one level higher and repeat that cycle to get down to the top three priorities that we need to focus on. It's about our relationships, it's about the conversations, and it's about consistently advocating for that alignment and not being an order taker. Because an order taker will say, okay, 42 priorities, absolutely, we can do that.
Oh, I see.
No,
Good. Nice.
we can't.
Because they're yes people. They are answering the call on the order and executing on the order, as you say. Which is, by the way, why I really like IDAD, because it doesn't suggest that there aren't orders to be taken, but that's then when you switch into the DAD part. So there's the intake. Hey, and then let's discuss discovery, analyze, etc. Okay. Okay, last one. So speaking of three, if and aside from getting the book, the Trusted Learning Advisor people, do you have sort of three go-to things that the L&D profession or professionals really need to be honing in on to help them crack the code, so to say, to shift their persona, mindset, behavior, attributes to becoming that trusted learning advisor?
Okay, so we said the book doesn't count because
Doesn't
that's
count.
obvious. And so I'll assume the workshop that we provide through WeLearn also doesn't count. So we'll take that out as
Those are
well.
bonuses 4 and 5. Yeah, they're like, yeah, bonuses.
Okay, so step number one, I have no affiliation with this book, but it is truly the most important book that any L&D practitioner will read, talent practitioner. Make it stick, The
Ah,
Science of Successful Learning. You must read that book. There should be, again, I said earlier, there's a minimum barrier entry to our field. That should be a requirement. It takes the 5 characteristics of learning of science and it breaks it down in a digestible, storytelling, meaningful manner written by 2 brilliant professors from the University of Michigan and Peter Brown, a great storyteller. It's extremely valuable. So that would
mhm.
be number one. Read
Yeah.
that book. Number two, start conducting qualitative research in your organization with this caveat. If you don't know what qualitative research is, first learn about it, please. I, again, will raise my hand and say, I thought I knew what it was. And it turns out that I was asking biased and leading questions for years. So take some time to understand what it means to actually ask qualitative questions and to run qualitative interviews and then go out and start conducting them on a
Mhm.
reoccurring basis, at least twice a year. Include your stakeholders and include your learners. And number three, I feel like this has got to be the swan song here, the cat's
I'll put
meow.
in a drum roll after. Yeah.
Yeah, I had something and I forgot it. Make it stick, qualitative research. And I guess I would add in part of number two, number three would be understand design thinking.
Oh, cool.
Des Design thinking to me is one of the most important tools in our toolkit. I think of it as my shield.
Yeah.
When my stakeholder gives me an order, rather than saying, well, I want to go back and conduct a needs analysis, I will say things like, hey, this could be a great design thinking initiative. Do
Mm.
you think we could take a little time? And by the way, stakeholder, I'll take care of all this. My team will take care of all of it. We just need a little extra time, but let's take a step back. Let's use and invoke the design thinking methodology, a scientific methodology to help us make sure that we're solving the right problem. And then it will help us through iterating to potential great solutions that we can be bringing to you. Those would be my three.
Very, very good. Of course, with bonuses 4 and 5. Dr. Keith Keating, this has been amazing, long overdue. International Man of Mystery, Chief Learning and Development Officer at BDO Canada, and the award-winning author of the Trusted Learning Advisor. If you're in the L&D space or you're an executive listening in, not even an L&D, I assure you that if you wade through the book, you will look at what learning and development is in a whole different light. And I encourage you to take a look at this piece of art that Dr. Keating has written. Where can we find out
I
more
have one
about you,
more.
Keith? Oh,
I have
bonus?
one more. Yes,
Bonus.
another bonus. Book clubs.
Oh yeah.
Run book clubs.
Hmm.
I mean, I happen to know a good book for a book club. Just saying, don't
Is
keep
it?
knowledge to
Is
yourself.
it? Is it
And
is it Keating? How do you is it sorry? Is it Keating? How do you is it Keating? Is it?
yeah,
Oh, it's still the same guy. Oh, it's Keith
yeah,
Keating.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. Same
sorry.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
I know. We're all getting bored of him by now. LinkedIn is a great place. You want to learn
Cool.
more about the book, trustedlearningadvisor.com, learn about more about me, keithkeating.com, but LinkedIn, love to connect there.
Well, it's just a true pleasure. Thanks very much for this, and again, your time, and for really pushing the profession. Um, when I come across names like Guy Wallace in the book and seeing some other mutual colleagues of ours, I think what you've done now is created a manifesto for the L&D profession to actually grow up and to really lead what the organizations need. So, Dr. Keith Keating, thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to be your yearly charity case.
And folks, that was Mr. and Dr. Keith Keating. Again, thank you, sir. And we'll catch you on another episode soon of Leadership Now.